Great. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board to order. Our chair, Trini Willerton, is not available to join us today, so I'm vice chair of the Transportation Advisory Board. My name is Darcy Kitching, and I will hand the meeting over to Valerie.
Hi, this is Valerie Watson. I'm the Interim Director of Transportation and Mobility for the City of Boulder, and we're here today to provide space for our Transportation Advisory Board to have an orientation of sorts to cover a few topics. And we're going to go ahead and get started. But first, a few quick notes for tab members and staff. Go ahead and if you have your laptop with you, join the Zoom. Have your mic on in the Zoom. That way the Zoom will pick up your voice. But you can keep your camera off and turn off your laptop speaker so you don't get any feedback. All right, and if you need Wi-Fi, if you're using the public Wi-Fi right now and are worried about your connectivity, there is a Wi-Fi for the library that's also open that does not require a password. It's BPLD guest in your Wi-Fi list. Once you join that Wi-Fi, it'll bring up a screen on your browser with like a notification. And when you see that screen, there's a teeny tiny box that you need to check. And then you will be all connected and ready to go with that Wi-Fi. Also, if you're here in person, there are restrooms downstairs. There are no restrooms up here on the second floor. So just make your way to the stairs if you need to use the restroom. Or refill your water bottle, that kind of thing. For those of us joining on the Zoom virtually, if you have any technical issues with the meeting, please put questions in the Q&A box. And a member of our team will be monitoring to see if anyone's having any issues. All right, so here's a quick overview of all the topics we're going to cover today. So tabs, roles, and functions. I think we're going to do some quick introductions, and then our city attorney's office will talk about roles and responsibilities, and then our former tab chair will talk about meeting management and the rhythm of business of being a tab member. Then staff are going to provide an overview of the Transportation and Mobility Department, something that for those of you who are new, we hope will be really useful to you. And even for those of you who have been with us for a while as tab members, we hope that is just great background and a refresher for you to have as well. Then we'll talk about some tools for the future and just leave some time at the end for closing thoughts and reflections together as a board and as staff. So real quick, it's always nice to think about the place that we live and work. And these are just some quick stats. Something I wanted to mention is, in addition to our street network and all of the signals and the street light system that we've recently acquired and are upgrading, we also have all of these miles of multimodal transportation infrastructure. So you all as tab members really are carrying the torch of a long legacy of multimodal transportation planning in the city. Think about 84 miles of off-street multi-use paths. That's pretty remarkable for a city of our size. 90 ped and bike underpasses that allow folks to move along those paths. We're soon going to have 10 electric hot buses in our bus fleet. So just nice to kind of think about these are the things that we already have, but we always talk about those in addition to what we want to enhance as we do our work together on tab. We also have 38,000 students that live here in addition to all of our residents, and so that's something to keep in mind as well. Starting in 2027, we're going to be home to the Sundance Film Festival. So that is really kind of new for this board to be thinking about as the city prepares to bring thousands of people over a 2-week period to Boulder and starting in January of 2027. So let's do some quick introductions for everyone that's here because we have tab members and city staff. Tell us your name, what your role is, and what is one thing you want people to see or experience when they visit Boulder. If you could direct them to see one thing, what would that be? And maybe extra bonus points for how would you tell them to get there? So let's start with our Vice Chair, Darcy.
Oh, boy, so many things. Hi, I'm Darcy Kitching, Vice Chair of the TAB, and I do routinely take people to experience things in Boulder, and so it's hard to pick just one, but the thing that jumps out to me at this moment is the Dushanbe Tea House. That's like the place. Well, it's distinctive, right? I'm sorry. I mean, I guess I'm gonna stick with it. That's what I choose. Right.
I'm Mike Mills, he, him, I'm a TAB board member, and I would take people to see the Boulder Creek Path.
Hello, I'm Janet Michaels with the City Attorney's Office. People in Boulder, I frequently take to Chautauqua. It's a good place to hike, and I would take the shuttle from New Vista High School.
Park, yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Danny O'Connor, City of Boulder staff. I'm the transit program manager. And gosh, I second everything that was just said. I mean, it's like a bingo card. I would, I would be probably downtown walking and just to see just the energy and the interactions with, just who's here, because it's just so diverse and it's intellectual and students, and just really love the energy of our people, our community here.
My name is Devin Joslin. I'm the city's principal traffic engineer. Mine's very random. I don't even know if it's open to the public, but the CU Rec Center is beautiful. Those are some of the most beautiful basketball courts you've ever seen.
I'm Karen Fitzpatrick, and I'm TAB secretary. One of the places I like to reveal to people is peace, love, and chocolate.
Yes.
I don't eat like chocolate, but it's such a magical little shop.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Jean Sanson, City of Boulder staff. I'm the policy advisor for the department, and like Janet, when I have guests coming to visit, it's Chautauqua. It's just such an iconic view. And I have to share that my daughter had a friend visiting from Scotland a couple of weeks ago when we had that really thick fog, and she couldn't even see the flat earth. So the one thing I think everyone should come and see was hidden in a shroud.
But it felt like home.
But it felt like home. I totally understand. You're right.
I'm Jody Jacobson, Deputy Director for Business Services. I support utilities as well. I think the trail network, so if somebody visits me, it depends on their fitness level. We either walk around Beely Lake and admire the views from, Fairview parking lot, that end, or the trail network on that end of town.
Great. Well, hello everyone, Stephen Marijo, Transportation Planning Manager, and I think similar to Jody was going to say the trail network, I might say the B360 is a great loop that really highlights a lot of the features we have, and always encourage folks, hop on a B-cycle, hop on a line, enjoy it on kind of various modes of transportations.
Nice. Tila Duhame, I'm just a citizen at large now. I was on TAB for about 8 years. It just came off in March. And when people visit, again, it does matter like how able-bodied they are, but I do tend to have able-bodied people. But I love to give them a bike and then take them on a tour of the murals that are all around town that are really hard to see if you're in a car.
Yeah.
Like, you go on this alley or that alley or the backside of this building and that kind of stuff. So the secret little public art bits that can be had and best had by foot or by bike.
I'm Michael Ledesma, one of the newer TAB members. When folks come to visit, I typically take them to Dushanbe Tea House and Pearl Street. Those are the two places. And if I can, I'll bike there to Dushanbe, lock the bikes, and then walk over to Pearl Street. So it's really great connectivity there from my house to South Boulder.
Hi everyone, Hernan Villanueva, DAB member. If it was kids, I would take them to the water fountain in front of the downtown courthouse.
Yeah.
I will take the bus there. from Table Mesa, to Central Park and then walk there. If it's adults, usually Chautauqua can be busy, so the trails around Anchor are really nice. They're really pretty views and way less busy. So, yeah.
And again, I'm Valerie Watson, the Interim Director of Transportation and Mobility. The place that I first experienced the first time I ever came to Boulder was that little place along Boulder Creek, kind of by our office, right near here at the library where we're having this meeting at, where there's that little amphitheater seating built into the side of the creek with the rocks. And you can just take your shoes off and go put your feet in the creek, no matter, I mean, I guess you'd want to be a little cautious if it was really ripping that day. But most days you can just go and put your feet in the water. And I thought there was something so magical the first time I came to Boulder and could just experience nature in the middle of the, urban core like that. I think that is a really special and magical experience for someone who has never been here. And Sydney.
Oh, hi everyone, Sydney Schieffer, I'm a transportation planner and your technical host. I think, my last visitor was my brother and my niece, and with him, we biked to Scott Carpenter Park and had a picnic, so that was really lovely.
That's great. So in the future, if someone already took your idea, you can just say pass.
Yeah.
That's totally acceptable.
And then we miss Mary in the corner.
Oh, yeah,
Mary.
Mary.
Mary's hiding.
Yeah. I'm Mary, I'm the executive assistant for the Public Works Department. And I was gonna say Chautauqua as well. You don't see mountains like that in South Texas, so.
Thank you, Mary. So I think we introduced everyone. So next we're gonna transition to talk about TAB's role and function as a board. There are multiple boards at the City of Boulder. Transportation Advisory Board is just one. But we wanted to provide a TAB specific overview of your role as a board and how you function and really where does that come from? So I'd like to hand it over to our City Attorney's Office. Janet Michaels is here. Teresa Taylor-Tate, our city attorney, had a last minute conflict come up and wasn't able to join us today, but we're so grateful to have Janet Michaels here. She supports our department, multiple other departments in her role in the city attorney's office. We love working with Janet, and so we're really glad that she could be here today to provide some of this overview for you all. Just a quick note that this, even though feels kind of like a formal presentation, feel free to interject with questions throughout the conversation today. We want this to be a discussion. We want this to be really useful for you all as TAB members. So I'll let Janet get started.
Thank you, Valerie, and TAB members. Good to meet you, good to see you, and good to see staff. The first slide kind of shows who we are, Teresa Taylor-Tate and myself, and you can reach me at via my email at Michaels, michelsj@bouldercolorado.gov. And please reach out if I can provide legal support. Next slide, please. So how do we know what our roles are? They are established through various means. The first is the city charter. The charter was established when the city was incorporated. And the charter is of the people. It was voted on by the people and it can only be changed by a vote of the electors. Civics lesson, the charter compares to the United States, to the state constitution. So it's the overall framework that we have for the city that has general policies and general goals. And then we have laws that support and implement the charter or the constitution in the case of the broader spectrum. Now, the charter specifically reserves to the city council all the powers of the city that are otherwise delegated in the charter by ordinance. So there are some things that only city council can do. And then there are some things that they delegated to boards or to staff. The charter is the general framework for all boards and commissions, and then it's a high level kind of philosophy, and then the Boulder Revised Code, which are the laws that are implemented by city council, have more specifics about TAB's role. So the Boulder Revised Code, that's legislative. It can be amended by city council or by the electors through the petition process. The code provides more detail about what the functions are, and implement the charter. And in our particular case, we have a specific code section for the Transportation Advisory Board. And it defines TAB's roles in working with the community. Or I should say, for example, it defines particular roles. So one of them that I just wanted to call out, it gives into this level of specificity. It defines the particular role of TAB in working with the community and transportation staff to develop criteria and guidance for neighborhood traffic mitigation projects. So you can see that it gets very granular when we get into the Board Revised Code. That's just one of the many things that TAB is authorized and the responsibilities to do. And then we also have city manager rules. I wanted to touch on those because a lot of people don't know that we have those. They don't so much, I don't see a lot of them in the transportation realm. But the city manager rules are proposed by staff, they're adopted by the city manager. They have a weight of law, they have the same sentencing potential if there's a violation, that a violation of the traffic code or of our, general criminal offenses can have, except there's no jail. If somebody gets charged with violating a city manager rule. We use those in cases where we need to have something that's more nimble. So for example, if we wanted to implement some rules that went along with how our shared micromobility will work and how we will kind of set the stage for our vendors, we could have those in city manager rules. So that is just kind of the three places where we derive what our roles are.
So Jen, am I remembering correctly that the neighborhood parking permit that's at the level of city manager rules,
That
right?
is in the code.
It's in the code.
It's in the
But the
code.
way that the rules are set up, like whether it's 3 hours here or there, isn't that?
That's set by city manager.
Yeah, okay, so they work together a little bit, but I think that's another big one. It's kind of hard to find, hard to look up.
In other words, you might be looking for something in the code and think it's not in there, and it's actually in a different place. So these things, as they work together, you always have to kind of, and you're reviewing things as TAB members, always think about that things could be in multiple locations.
And if you're lost or you wanted to find something, fabulous transportation staff or you get the city attorney's office can help you navigate and then find those rules.
Where are the rules published?
They are, there's a website that has a place where all the rules are housed. It's in the same place where the Boulder Revised Code is housed and the charter. It's just a different place that you click on to access, but they're published there, they live there. The city manager's office has all the rules, the various departments that implement rules or are responsible for the rules also have copies of them, so your transportation staff will have the transportation rules as well, probably in hard copy. Next, we are on that slide. So city council establishes city policies. City council does consider advice from boards and commissions to gather community feedback concerning the policies and other community concerns. And then the role of advisory boards is, except for very few circumstances that actually don't apply to TAB, advisory boards are advisory to city council. All expressions of policy of national interest, international, statewide, countywide, those issues should come from council and not from boards and commissions or individual board members. Those are council driven. However, if there is a policy that boards and commissions are interested in council adopting, a board and commission can make a suggestion to council to take a policy position on something, and oftentimes the board and commission will do that in a resolution, not individual members, but the entire board. So you vote on it. If you're making a recommendation, then if it's a recommendation, then you go to a public hearing and get feedback from the community. Then you could propose a resolution to the city council to take a position on whatever policy is outside of the city that you want to look at. Members can address city council or the community from a personal position. But you always need to identify yourself as a board member and then state whether you're speaking from a personal position or if you're speaking on behalf of a minority or a majority position of the board that the board has taken. It's very important to not take a position on behalf of a board, on behalf of TAB, if TAB hasn't authorized you to do that. But you have a right to free speech and you can communicate at council meetings, at other board and commission meetings as a member of the public, but it is important that you say that you're speaking on your personal behalf and not on behalf of the board that you're serving on. Next slide, please. So these are generally functions of all boards and commissions. You hold regular meetings. You have to have an opportunity for public comment, and your meetings are set up to have public comment. TAB can also hold special meetings and do site training or site visits and do trainings like this. And at those kind of special meetings, public comment is not required. Other regulations applicable to all boards, you keep minutes of records. Thank you, Meredith, for the fine job that you do doing that. You appoint a chair and a vice chair and a secretary who's typically a city employee. You run the meetings in accordance with the Roberts Rules of Order. Those are parliamentary rules that keep the meeting flowing smoothly. But you don't have to follow Roberts rules if the board adopts its own set of rules and regulations, and I understand that that's one of the things that TAB is looking at for this year, and that's going to be discussed later in this orientation. And if your procedural rules don't address it, then you fall back onto the Roberts Rules of Order, which are just a hoot. Let's see. Prior to making any recommendation to city council or to staff or to other boards and commissions as authorized, you have to hold a public hearing, and that's a little bit different for TAB than it is for some boards and commissions. Some that's not required, but for TAB, before you make a recommendation, you have to hold a public hearing. So you gather information from the public and then you make your recommendation on a vote, on an official action. Other things that are applicable to all boards, kind of technical things. If a member is present at a meeting and doesn't vote, then the member's vote is recorded in the affirmative. So you can't say, I'm gonna pass on this unless you are approving minutes that at a meeting that you weren't at, or if there is something in the motion that would create a conflict of interest for you, those you can recuse yourself from voting, but otherwise, if you don't vote, it's recorded in the affirmative. And then one thing to keep in mind, recommendations of most boards and commissions are recommendations to council, recommendations to staff, which they may or may not follow. So that's something that, it is a recommendation, but as advisory board members, people take what you say seriously. They listen very carefully and take it to heart. Next slide, please. So TAB, 5 members, you're appointed by council. You went through that process. 5-year terms, they're staggered terms for the most part. Next slide, please. Other responsibilities specific to TAB are listed on this slide. Those come right out of the Boulder Revised Code. You advise the city manager and city council and make recommendations concerning any transportation manager. And by advising the city manager, that's generally through the transportation and mobility director. The directors stand in the stead of the manager who communicates to the manager. And then advising council typically comes up when in a couple of ways. Boards and commissions send a letter yearly to city council identifying what your priorities are for the year. I understand that's going to a biennial this year, but I don't have a lot of details on that. But that's one way to communicate what the TAB's priorities are and to the council. TAB reviews, monitors, and proposes changes to the Transportation Master Plan, an incredibly important document in the city. You work with this community and transportation mobility staff to develop and recommend traffic mitigation problems. We talked about projects, we talked about that. And then you advise city council and planning board concerning alternative transportation programs. And you track the goals of the TMP. Next slide, please. And I kind of paused and I said, and the planning board, there's something specific in the code that TAB advises the city manager and the planning board and the city council concerning any transportation matter except for reviews under land use regulations. So that's zoning, for instance, or variances, all the things that come under land use. Unless the city council asks TAB specifically for feedback on that. So otherwise, that's something that is not authorized for TAB to give recommendations on. Next slide, please. TAB also reviews all the city transportation environmental assessments. Those are the community environmental assessment process, the C process that you're going to be hearing more on later, and also the capital improvements programs, and then make recommendations concerning those programs to council or to transportation staff. Actually, you're going to hear more about both of those coming up. Next slide, please. I do want to provide some legal cautions on a real high level. TAB doesn't perform any direct administrative or operational functions. Council is also prohibited from directing administrative and operational functions. So what that means, TAB doesn't design or deliver programming, but can provide input as the board and as council and is solicited by staff. And you can't make decisions about the hiring and performance of specific employees who perform those operational functions. TAB members, any board members, cannot use their position as an individual board member in your individual capacity to change long-standing city processes or plans. The best practice is to introduce proposed changes to plans or processes at a meeting where everybody gets to form a consensus and you vet it and you have a public hearing and you get feedback from the community. And then once you get consensus, at least 3 members, then you can present it to council as a potential work plan item. And, you know, because the BRC requires TAB to hold a public meeting, that's an understanding and a preference for the board to speak as a unified voice as opposed to independent members. That's not to say that you can't, because again, you have a First Amendment right to make those communications. But the expectation from council is that you're a board, you're collecting feedback from staff and from the community, and you speak as a unit. You won't agree sometimes on everything, and so there's an opportunity to have a majority opinion and a minority opinion when you present things. Members of boards and commissions are sometimes asked questions from the media or would like to publish things in the media, like an opinion column or something. There's not a prohibition on that. There's a caution that if you are speaking in your personal capacity, you need to say that clearly. And you'll see those city council or other boards and commissions, and I've seen them from TAB members as well in the Daily Camera. We are writing this in our individual capacity and not as a member of city council, transportation advisory board. The exception to that is where the board has authorized somebody to speak on behalf of the entire board. So then we would say, and I've been authorized to speak on behalf of the board. This is how the board voted. This is the recommendation the board is making. Boards and commission members also must be mindful of the code of conduct. That is something that regulates boards and commissions appointed and all staff. There's some obvious prohibitions in the code of conduct, like not using your position for personal gain. Members also cannot share confidential information. So sometimes My office, the city attorney's office, will correspond with TAB in a confidential memorandum. What is contained in any communication from the city attorney's office is confidential and can't be shared outside of the organization. And that's true of council and all board members. And along that vein, anything that you share with the city attorney's office is also privileged and confidential, so we don't share it either. It's an attorney-client privilege between our office and you. And so your communications with us are privileged. You can ask us for legal advice, and we can do that to you, and it stays amongst us.
So when we send an email to you, for example, asking a question, that's not part of the public records?
It's not.
Interesting.
It's not.
Okay.
Well, it's privileged from disclosure.
Yeah. Well, it really.
The fact that he sent it to you is discoverable.
Yeah, the fact that you sent it, okay,
So it's
that's
advisable to pick up the phone, right? That's what we were told is make a phone call if you want to have a truly privileged conversation. Right.
That is true, but in terms of open records request, if somebody wanted to hear wanted copies of our email correspondence, you don't get that. Right.
So there's only a trail that I send an email,
Yes,
but there's no,
the content.
the content is, okay.
Exactly, yeah, good question. There are other more subtle requirements in the code of conduct, and this is applicable to all boards and commissions, that you perform your duties with impartiality, and you take into consideration all available information, all the circumstances and the resources, and make the best decision for the city, not just the position that you personally favor. You're kind of speaking for the city, for the community, and so while it might not, a position might not be something that you personally favor, if it's in the best interest of the city for financial reasons or logistic reasons or whatever, all boards and commissions have to take into consideration all information and then make the best decision for the city. Sometimes that means not advocating for something like, just as an example, redesigning a road that's been years in the planning, and you've got a personal preference for some other way the road ought to operate. That is not, you have to make your decisions based on what's best overall and not your personal preferences. This slide also asks some questions. The first one is, how can you appropriately talk to your fellow TAB members outside of meetings? So all business of the city should be conducted in a duly noticed public meeting. Like council, board members should not be discussing city business outside of a public meeting. And this is a state law. This is the Colorado Open Meetings Law. And just to give you some hefty background, the Colorado Supreme Court talks about democratic government best serving the people when the decision making is open to public scrutiny. So you're having hearings and you have open meetings, and the public gets to hear how your decisions are made. You're not talking to one another on a policy decision or on a recommendation and making up your mind and then coming to the meeting and rubber stamping it. That's a problem, and other communities that we don't see it very often. There are serious consequences for violating the open meetings laws. First is that if there is a violation that's proven, whatever the action was that you took based on the vote that was the violation, in violation of open meetings, can be it can be rendered invalid. And that can be problematic. You can redo it. There are ways to fix it, but depending on what the decision is, you can think that if there isn't a lawsuit and it plays out, for 2 years, and meanwhile there's been something that's been implemented that's based on an invalid decision, that can really wreak havoc. So it's a real significant consequence to the city. Also of consequence to the city is that somebody who claims that their rights have been denied because of an open meetings violation can sue the city. They have standing to sue the city, but the court can issue an injunction to enforce the purposes of the open meetings law, so we can get admonishment and by the courts. But if for this one, there's a violation, they shall, it's mandatory, assess attorney's fees against the city, attorney's fees and costs. So if there's a mistake, there's an open meetings violation, it's proven in court, the person that makes the complaint does get their attorney's fees and costs. And for litigation, we could be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes, sir.
So my understanding is this applies to communication between 3 or more members?
It does, that's, yeah, and so thank you for, that's when we're having and making decisions outside. So I was also going to say that there, for expediency reasons, might be a necessity for board members to speak one-on-one to one another. And you can do that as long as there's not more than 2 people having that conversation. Another thing you have to be cautious of is your emails. You don't want to have a conversation via email, hit reply all, and oh, I think that's a really good idea. You know, let's talk about this. That would be a violation of the open meetings laws. What we recommend is that you try to conduct all your business in a publicly noticed meeting. That's just the way to stay safe and to keep the city from getting sued. And from being open, I mean, the purpose of the Colorado meetings laws is so the public can see how decisions are made. And that's something that, at a value that we hold and that the state of Colorado holds very closely.
And Janet, that's the serial meetings that you're referring to as part of that law.
Yeah, they call it, so one member sends an email to somebody else, well, what do you think about this proposal? Should we go and look at it? And then you respond back to everybody, you know, I've been thinking about that, and what I think is, that's a serial meeting, even if it's between 2 people, you shouldn't really be having it. If it's only between 2, you can, but as soon as you hit reply all, that's a whole meeting that hasn't been noticed and the public hasn't been able to participate in.
And that could happen through email or phone call. Those 2 mechanisms would both result in a serial meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie.
If it were a conference call, you mean, or
Conference call, or you do a phone chain.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking.
Right, so this is that I
about
Oh, I
this
see.
agenda item, and now I'm gonna get your feedback, and then, you know, you can't do that.
Okay.
And I just heard, you know, that from Darcy, that she's thinking these things, yeah, we can't do. It's just best to conduct your business in a public meeting. That's the intent of the open meetings law, and that's what we strongly encourage people to do.
Can I just add one
Yeah, of course.
query here? So a lot of times, you know, there's some big issues and big things that are coming up. And it's not really practicable to have all of the discussion, all of the thinking happening during the meeting. I have had, and I think it's been a positive experience where some board member who's particularly involved or has, you know, has some expertise or has done some deep thinking or maybe knows, you know, has interacted with staff on it. To say, you know, at the meeting, this is gonna be coming up. And here's my thinking on it. There's no back and forth. But I, you know, just wanted to raise this with you. I think, you know, maybe this is gonna be better addressed. If we have, you know, if we frame the discussion this way and this way and this way at the meeting, but to give an advance notice of what you are thinking of, if it's really gonna be kind of hairy. And another thing that often happens is we'll, if we have questions on, you know, a presentation or a memo item. And there's a number of questions, like I get really nitpicky on drafts sometimes. To give staff those questions in writing ahead of time. So you're not springing it on them.
Yeah.
They'll have time to look it up, or to be able to think about and explain where that paragraph came from. And that, again, it's not really conducting the business of, but it's helping everyone be able to conduct the business as required during the meeting. Because otherwise, Valerie, I'll have to look into that and get back to you in 2 weeks, and then you forget.
Yeah, those things, that is acceptable. You're not having a two-way conversation. That's what we need to avoid, is the two-way conversation in emails with more than 2 members of the board.
So in that example, you're saying you would send, maybe you've had a conversation with staff about a memo item that you found problematic or interest or something, you know, you wanted more detail.
Yeah.
Then you could send an email to the whole town and say, I was talking with staff about this when I was at ABC.
Or this
It's gonna
reminds
come
me
up in
when
the-
it came up 4 years ago before you guys were on.
Right, right.
And this is how we handled it then, and it seems inconsistent with recommendation. Now, we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that, and then what we wouldn't want to happen is to reply all and have that
Yes.
conversation.
Yep. No, it's just a one-way megaphone.
One way, got it.
And this pertains only to the work of TAD.
Yes,
If you get
correct.
together and hang out with TAD members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can
Talk
get
about
to
it.
that way.
The business of the city.
Yeah, business of the city.
Right.
And another way to really avoid any appearance that there have been internal conversations, send your questions to Tab or to Valerie, to the
Yes,
team,
yeah.
to staff.
Yeah.
And then they can collect and say, these are some of the things that members have suggested that we think about before we start talking about this certain issue. So send questions, to Valerie or to the staff members, and then they can present it to the members, and it's not a violation of open meetings laws.
Okay.
And this is something that Tila might cover a little bit more when we talk about the rhythm of TAB, but officially the director of the department is the liaison to TAB. And so it's best to really kind of funnel and direct all inquiries and communications through the director. And that's for many reasons that we'll cover in more detail. But wanted to make sure that even though Janet's telling you a lot of the things you can't do, there's a lot that you can do to communicate. And so if you do have questions right now about that, while we have Janet, this is a great time to ask, is if you have a particular scenario in mind that you wanted.
Well, another thing that has come up is, so say at a city open house for a project, right? We, all of us can't be there representing TAB, right? And then we have to sort of, we want to make sure that there aren't more than 2 members at the open house at a time. Right, yeah, okay, so that's something that has come up before, is that during events and stuff, we can't all be there together. Because that looks like a meeting, or that is effectively a meeting, right? So we have to either have different hats on or time our participation.
That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That's how you communicate with one another. There are also going to be times when you'll want to communicate with city council.
So how does that work?
Logistically, it's similar rules. You can't talk to more than 2 council members at one time, or it's a meeting, because it's their meeting, you're talking with them. If you have an issue that is something that you're bringing up independent of official action of the board, you can speak to council at a meeting, at public comment in a meeting. You can email council. Again, from what I had said before, you want to be clear that you're expressing an individual opinion, an individual statement. It's not collective of the board, unless there has been a board meeting. You have discussed a position. TAB has taken official action and has a recommendation. And then you communicate that as you've been assigned or designated by the board. Go and tell council that this is our position. So that's something that you can do too, and speak on behalf of the board. You'll also have an opportunity, sometimes we're not all going to agree. And there's an opportunity to show both the majority positions and the minority positions. So there have been times when there will be a city council meeting, you'll have a board and commission speak on behalf of the board. This is the recommendation that we're making. There were 3 in favor, 2 opposed. And we'd like to hear from our colleagues who opposed it, and then the opposition can speak to why they opposed it. And that would give council the flavor of what happened, at the entire board meeting. So that's a way to communicate.
With the designation, to make that presentation, council need to have it at the TAB meeting prior to that. That council, so we'd say, okay, well, we intend to take this matter to council and articulate the differences.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and are we you would take a vote.
Yeah,
take
take
an
the
official
official
vote
vote.
that, yes, Darcy will represent this position. And it can speak, and here's what we've agreed to, and you can communicate that to the city council.
That needs to be followed.
And I'll just mention that staff, in our memos to council, we always report on what TAB discussed and how the vote was conducted and that kind of thing. And we're required, if there's a dissenting vote, to articulate that position as well. So there's always going to be that, there's the meeting minutes as well as our staff memos that cover that content. So this would be in addition to what staff would already normally routinely have.
Oh,
Is
yes.
the staff memo sufficient? Okay. But typically the staff.
Yeah, typically it would, and typically, you know, TAB is kind of aligned with what staff was doing. It's pretty unusual, but yeah, no, there was a period where there were 2 or 3 pretty significant differences of opinion between TAB and the staff recommendation. And for the first one, TAB was unhappy with how it had been with previous staff. We're unhappy with how the TAB deliberation and decision-making was reported to council. And so for the next 2 disagreements, I don't know where I did both of them or not, but I appeared to say, here's why we disagreed with the staff recommendation. The then acting director presented why it was the staff recommendation. And so it was much more in front of council, like why we had disagreed, and we just let them pick and choose, like we just made our cases.
Well, and you really raised an important issue, Tila. As advisory board members, you've been selected by council because you've got a certain level of expertise. You've got a certain way that you will, it's something special that you can bring to the table. And it's, you know, council members are human. And when they hear something from you individually, maybe they hear it differently than if they heard it from the board as a whole. And that's not really a fair governance model, to have one-on-one conversations and try to be influential. You're appointed to a board, you're not appointed as an individual to advise city council. And so the best practice is always to come together as TAB, to vet something, to have your public hearing, to have your conversation in a public facing meeting, and then present that to city council. Let's see. We talked about disagreements, and you can definitely show disagreeing sides, and thank you for that lived experience. That's really really helpful. So does anybody have any more questions about that, how you communicate with each other or how to communicate with council? Well, and one of the questions posed is, who do I call if I have a legal question? That would be me or Teresa Taylor Tate. And Valerie as liaison can get you our contact information and our email, and you can communicate with us. Our conversations are privileged. What if I have an idea for the staff plan? So
This is a trick question.
You raise it with director as liaison. Staff, it's important to remember that staff takes direction from the city manager. And the function of staff is to support city council. So you don't direct the work plan, you go through the director. You can request research or other work through the director, but if the work requires more than what staff has capacity to do, that's determined reasonable, then there's a process. You can take it to city council and say, you know, we really think that this is important, and we understand that staff has some resource limitations, and city council, we would like you to make this a priority. So that's, there is a process for, even if you disagree, you think, by golly, they're not understanding the importance of this. I really want this to be a part of the work plan. There's a way that you can get there. City staff are ultimately responsible for supporting city council. City council expects staff, our professional transportation folks here, to exercise their best professional judgment on issues and policies whether or not the board agrees with their judgment. Lived experience, it doesn't always happen, but mostly there's alignment. And staff will always let the board know, or let council know if the board disagrees. So that concludes the presentation I have. I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm happy to field questions, but if you think of something later, you could always just pass them through Valerie or contact me directly.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway is that Janet and Teresa are resources to you all as tab members, me as well. And yeah, does anyone have any questions, things that are on your mind before we move on to the next part of the session?
Can you give us an example of what would be a type of legal question a member of TAB might ask you?
Let me see. Well, a lot of times, okay, here's one. Having to do with a conflict of interest. And my employer has contracts with the city, but I am not a decision maker. But we do have contracts. Is that, do I have to recuse myself from any decisions? So you have like recusal questions, that might be one. Who else has legal given? That's trying to think, conflicts of interest, a lot of times that's what we will get questions about, is the code of conduct. What do you think about is it all right if I accept this gift? Is it okay if I participate in, some function? Or is there an inherent conflict of interest? So those things come up more frequently, I think, than a lot of others. But a good question. You'll know when you hear.
Yeah.
It's really helpful to be familiar with the code of conduct though, because it does have a list of expectations and kind of examples of things that are violations of the code of conduct. And if there's a question, then it would come to us.
Let's say I wanna take Darcy to a show at Boulder Theater. We have beer, we have dinner, we go there, and Mike is there too. Like, we bought tickets separately from each other. We're not there to discuss business, there's no real reason to think we would. Is it still best practice for us to just stay on opposite sides of the theater?
No,
Okay.
socialize. You socialize. You just talk about the business of the city.
Okay.
You talk to each other.
There you go.
Well, there's small time.
It's just like a small town.
I'm gonna keep waving at you guys.
And you do all the time.
Well, but that then raises a question, right? If we can hang out and socialize, could we not then be present at an open house so long as we're not?
You're conducting the business of the city when you're at an open house though.
Yeah.
You're there as a member of TAB doing TAB stuff.
Or is
So that's the difference.
You could just be.
Well, you have to be, you have to be explicit, like I can put on my chamber hat.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's a tab hat.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean-
the posters on that question, as a concerned citizen.
Right, I mean,
We're trying to avoid the appearance of anxiety.
well, that's the question, is it just the appearance or is it actual substance, right? Because you could be there. Oftentimes I'm at those meetings, at the open houses, and I'm not in any decision making. If I'm talking with Mike or Darcy, I'm not making decisions, we're typically just getting information. From staff, we're coming to a better understanding of the proposal. Which is not necessarily a deliberative or decision-making activity. So that's why I'm wondering, like, why would, I mean. Yes, I mean, I could totally see if we were getting together to decide, well, we should get rid of this thing, this should definitely not happen, that strikes me as a deliberative or decision-making activity.
Well, we're there to discuss the transportation project, so I avoid talking to more than one other TAB member at the same time, like open houses.
If I could make a suggestion, just because I've, observed our city council members encounter this situation in an open house, is that if they see a third person has shown up, then they kind of look at each other and one of them leaves.
I've
And
seen that happen.
yeah, and I think what you want to do is just be aware, have situational awareness, and the likelihood that more than two of you will show up at any given time is probably low, but if it does happen, you can always come over to me or, someone else on staff and say, can you remind me of what I'm supposed to do in this moment? And we can help you kind of figure out what course of action to take. And then our city attorney's office is always a phone call away as well. And I think that's the takeaway is, whether it's code of conduct or open meetings law or whatever, if you just have a question, you're not sure about something, the first call should be city attorney's office for something significant, or me, if I'm, accessible as well. Don't not ask the question. If there's just something you just feel, I don't know if I should do this, that Janet is here for you, and that office is there for you. They don't just represent the city and advise city staff, they also advise you as board members.
So what is your professional recommendation then? Let's say my Michael at the open house, I just, it's near my house, I just walk by and I see them. Do I leave or do I stay, take off I wouldn't have my
You're still
tag.
It doesn't matter.
The practice of the city council and of boards and commissions is to not have more than 2 people at that meeting.
At a time.
At a time. Yeah.
Even if they're just talking to each other.
So if it looked like you were about to leave, I would just hang outside.
Yeah, it really is situational. That's a good question. What if we're in a completely different space? I mean, you can't talk to one another. And I guess I just come back to it's a fine line, and the practice has been. But if in the situation, that they're completely separate, we're not even close to having a conversation. It probably isn't gonna be tagged as a violation of the open meetings law, but it can kind of get us into trouble until we get it all straightened out and you have depositions and you say, who were you there with and what were you talking about?
Yeah.
It can be online.
It might just be helpful to imagine everyone thinks you're gossiping about them. And so, if it looks weird and they're gonna, tattle, don't give them any reason to tattle.
Yeah. There in other government situations, there are times when people are justified in being skeptical of what people are doing at the same time. And we really want to not even let that skepticism rise.
Right. Yeah. Okay, any other last questions? All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Tila for the next section and give a big thank you to Janet for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, so we're just going to kind of roll into this next section because it kind of follows from what you just learned or refreshed on. This is more about just the business of being a tab member. What do I do? I know I have to go to meetings.
Before we take stuff,
Go ahead.
So Janet, but these open meetings are per group, right? So basically, like if there's but per group, like if there's 2 council members and then I go.
You're okay.
I'm okay, per group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great question. Yeah. That would probably come up with our open houses. Yeah, that's right. All right, so what do I do? I know I go to tab meetings if I'm a tab member. I probably need to read my email every few days, make sure I'm not missing something, right? So Tila is here, and thank you again for being here with us today on her own time. Just given her wealth of knowledge and years of experience and having been tab chair for a number of years as well. She's here to kind of go over that rhythm of what do you do when you're a tab member? For some people who join our boards and commissions in the city, it's your first experience being on a board. And you don't even really know what that means exactly until you kind of get thrown into it. And so we don't want you to feel that feeling. We want you to kind of have an overview of what are you expected to do and really what are the things you can do proactively as a board member. So over to Tila.
Thank you. I really enjoyed my time on tab. I had been interacting with city staff, not too many of you, like you, a couple of you predate me. But the change in stature, I guess, as being a tab member really brought home, like this is a position that does carry legitimacy. And I want you to take that seriously. Also, when you're keeping that in mind, that you're interacting with staff and they have a day job, and that day job on the nights we have tab meetings continues past 6 o'clock, right? My first couple of several months, maybe a couple of years on tab, it was not unusual for our tab meetings to go till 11:30 at night. which was torture for everyone. And Jean already has the look, but that's the look. It's awful. And it's hard for me to articulate why that happened, but we were phenomenally over talkative and underproductive. And I think that, like, I have enormous respect for my other cab members all of those times. Like, they were really fantastic people that had thoughts and were not necessarily on the same page about what they were supposed to be doing in the meeting with this valuable staff time, with these experts that are convened to listen to you and respect you and be nice to you. So, you know, the more that you are cognizant of that and that their professional responsibilities to you and respect for you, I think it's a very mutual thing. So, obviously, I didn't watch the July meeting, but that was really short, right? It was like an hour and 10. That's great. It also appears that over time, where there's more overlap and agreement between the direction that staff is going and the direction that TAB is urging staff to go, the more aligned you are in your missions and what you're trying to accomplish, this kind of synergy happens, and it does make everyone's work easier and shorter. That being said, when people ask me, what does it take to be on a board and commission? Nice to meet you. But I talked to all of you before, putting in an application. And the question was like, how much time does it take? And I was like, well, it's like an apartment in Manhattan. Like, you can spend as much as you want. And there will always be more you could do. But there is a minimum, and I want you to take that minimum seriously. You must read your packet, not at 2 p.m. that day. Like, skim it over, have an idea. Don't be surprised when you open it up and it's 85 pages on one agenda item. That can happen. Sometimes it's a very slim packet. You're welcome. But know when that packet comes out, have a look at it just so you have an idea of what's coming up and how long it's going to take. And there's nothing worse than like really wanting to, promote the city's micromobility management work. And then be ill-informed until like earlier that day and you're like, oh, I don't have time to think about all of this. Set some time aside. This is a mini job. And so you need to be able to prioritize your responsibility and your responsibility to staff to be able to set the time aside and read, know what's in there. The presentations are a little less important. Often they condense some of the material that's in the packet. But because they're prepared a week apart, and sometimes there's been some feedback with city council, say, between the preparation of the memo and the preparation of the presentation, you might notice some discrepancies. And that's actually a really great thing to ask about. Like, whoa, it looks like there was some decision-making, routing changes or something that happened on here. These are your cues that there's stuff going on behind the scenes that's getting prepared for you to weigh in on. So that's just kind of my thing. I really need people to do their homework. Because you're unprepared and it shows. And you're doing yourself a disservice, you're doing other TAB members a disservice, you're doing a disservice to other people who wanted to be on TAB and didn't get on. And you're doing a disservice to council. So, we set the agendas. Typically this happens the Wednesday after, 2 Wednesdays after the meeting. So Monday happens, Wednesday, skip a week, and then the next meeting. So the shape of the next meeting happens pretty early on. And typically the director will have a draft agenda. For most of my time on TAB, only the TAB chair attended this meeting with the director to hash out the agenda. During, I think, Mark McIntyre's term, he kept pulling me on so the vice could be also sort of informed. And that helps you not feel as much like you've been thrown into the deep end of the pool, Darcy, when, at the last minute, the chair can't share. You're not going completely blind. You've had some background on why this is coming. It's also a good time to ask, well, what about, when are we gonna talk about XYZ? Because the director probably knows not just what's happening in this next meeting, but what's likely to be coming down the pike. We're wrapping up public engagement. We'll need a little bit of time to, synthesize that. And so we're thinking maybe September or October, it's gonna be coming to you. So it's kind of good to have a longer vision about what's coming. There's a little bit of back and forth, it's rare that anything dramatic gets changed on the agenda. It's also kind of rare that something will come up between that agenda setting meeting and the tab meeting, but it happens and things get shuffled around at the last minute. So that's another thing, going into your meetings. Check the agenda the day or two before, recheck it if you haven't read it, because something might have fallen off, something new might have gotten added on. Something you might have interest in or think about and want to find out more about ahead of time, ahead of the meeting, because it does change a little bit. There's at the end of most meetings, we've structured it so that you have an opportunity to say, I've been thinking about, we should have more roundabouts, you know, let's talk about this in the next meeting or 6 meetings. If you haven't taken the time to read the materials or think about stuff outside of the meeting, you're not gonna really have any bright ideas for the agenda. And stuff's gonna occur to you, you know, 3 weeks later at 3 in the morning, you're like, oh, I wonder if we can talk about that. And then you're gonna forget it. So it's another reason to kind of be a little bit more organized and disciplined about thinking about tab work. So at that point, people can request an inclusion or a discussion at the agenda setting meeting. You can always, you know, email your chair. So your chair is the liaison between you and the department, just the same way the department head is the liaison between tab as a whole, you know, and the rest of staff. So funnel that stuff through your chair. And similarly, like as the chair or the vice chair, might feel really uncomfortable to be like always sending stuff to Valerie. Like, doesn't she have more important things to do? Yes, but one of the more important things to do is know what everyone else is working on. And so it actually helps her, or, you know, any director know when they've got too much on somebody's plate. And the last thing that Devin needs is to hear from you about the stop sign, like. Valerie can often like just kind of, she can bunt a whole bunch of these questions and be like, oh yeah, no, that's coming in September, just hang on, or, you know, Devin's definitely working on that. You know, I'll make sure that this is part of it, but he's probably already thinking about it. So stuff that would take Devin a while to be like, oh, what do I do? How do I answer this person? I'm already thinking about it. It's one of 17 things I have on my plate. Valerie can help sort of be a safety net, I suppose. Yeah. We already talked about how you select the chair, meet. You should generally be cognizant when you're making vacation plans and travel plans. Will you have connectability? If not, it's kind of important to tell people ahead of time. Because if, you know, three people can't make it to a meeting, like you can't have a meeting. And then you've scheduled all of this and all of this background work and all of these presentations and everything, all for naught. And it would then, I think, be incumbent upon you to meet on that second Monday of the month, which you're supposed to be, or it's the second Monday of the month. Third, isn't it?
Fourth Monday.
Second and fourth. The next 2 weeks after your regular meeting. You should also keep that in mind. It rarely comes up. But if there's something complicating the first Monday meeting, the sort of the default backup date is going to be that fourth Monday. So just bear that in mind. You might get surprised on vacation in Switzerland and have to go find a chocolate shop with Wi-Fi. Poor baby. Okay, let's go next. Yeah. Dedication. So the agendas are generally organized the same way. There's a pattern. You'll get into it, you know, more. Some of you have been on for a year, so like you get the flavor of it. Information item was something that kind of happened maybe 5 years ago. It was kind of unusual to have an information item, but it's sort of something that goes into the packet, but there's not planned to be any discussion. It's just, you know, here we have finalized the snow clearing guidelines. Here's what they are. They're going to be published on the city website. Just thought you should know we wrapped up that work that we talked about 6 months ago. On we go. Now, if you have a question about page 34, paragraph 6, that's me doing that annoying questioning. You can do that. There's just not really much time set aside. There's no time scheduled to discuss this stuff. That's a useful time. If you notice something in an information item that you do want to discuss, that's a great reason to let your chair know, let Valerie know, oh, I have a couple questions on this. You know, we might need 10 minutes of this. That just helps the meeting run more smoothly, and it gives the staff a heads up that there's going to be some discussion on this. And so to have, you know, just kind of be ready for questions. If you can be more specific with what your concerns are, great. Helps everyone prepare. So the agenda, you open up the meeting. Most of these are Zoom meetings now. I saw it says you have discretion on meeting in person. So I guess if you guys wanted to get together, I'm a sucker for a free dinner. That's why I'm
Yeah.
here. It's a free lunch.
Just
But you
quick-
could, but the Zoom meetings are really great, and you can do a hybrid meeting as well.
Yeah.
So,
So pre-pandemic, were
yes,
they?
they were in city
were
council
in-
chambers.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
I mean, do we have the option to go back to that? Cause I think it'd be nice to have in-person meetings, honestly, but then again,
Yeah.
it's convenient.
It's super convenient to have them in Zoom.
Yeah, you in person,
Yeah.
I prefer in-person meetings.
And we can have hybrid.
Yeah, we could.
And in particular, if there's something that's going to be you think is gonna have a lot of discussion, let's say you're working on the letter to council,
Yeah.
you know, in advance of the retreat, or
In-person could be really good.
in person can actually be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Cause it's hard on Zoom to see everybody. It's hard to, negotiate all that. So that's great. But Zoom is really helpful.
Yeah.
So they open the meeting, call it to order, go over the technical rules for the Zoom people. Then typically we fly straight into open comment from the public. That is separated out from a public hearing item. So people are, if you have a public hearing item, it's good to, at the top of public comment, to say, we're taking comments on everything except this issue. That's okay. No harm done. It was all the publicly, open meeting. It's fine. And it is unusual for there to be much back and forth between members of the public and board members. It's usually just a very polite, thank you very much. Occasionally it will strike at the heart of something and one of the members wants to, follow up or say, this has also been bothering me, or I learned from Valerie, this is coming up in September.
Yeah.
But it is not really a forum for dialogue with the members of the public. And then we move to agenda items. Usually there's an information item noted on the agenda, but like I said, there's no time scheduled for it. And then then it would go to agenda items. And these are things that are kind of within the purview of TAB. That being said, I will note that the Boulder Revised Code, like they could have just stopped at that first thing. TAB advises on all transportation matters. Stop and this sentence, move on. They called out a few other things, specifically overseeing capital improvement projects. There's a lot of nitty gritty on the annual budgeting process for that. That's actually a really useful place to be well read, to understand what's going on and to weigh in. Because there have been times when something that's been on that plan for 4 or 5 years suddenly doesn't really make sense, or we have an unexpected budget crunch, which is going to be happening this year. You might have to actually weigh in quite a bit on what you view as the best prioritization of what have to be constrained city efforts. And so those kinds of things, those are also called out in the Boulder Revised Code for good reason. They are considered a little bit more critical and more important. And so if they showed up in that slide that Janet went through, that's another reason you're going to have to be kind of thinking deeper and a little bit more than just the written words on the page in your packet. Then matters of staff, often that'll be stuff that's ongoing, that's of interest, but doesn't require any TAB action right now. I think I loved hearing stuff on like the regional transportation, things, stuff that TAB doesn't really weigh in on, but actually really affect your work and affect how the city interacts with other cities and how they're prioritizing, for instance, grant applications and stuff. That's usually stuff that matters from the staff. And then matters from the board. I would caution you to not bring your pet project and pet peeve. I did not find the 2-hour-long discussion of why we should be focusing more on roundabouts during a meeting a particularly good use of anyone's time. And so really, before bringing a matter before the board, it's a good idea to give your chair or Valerie a heads up. I'm going to be raising this during matters. It's good to be concise. Sometimes board members will come with, pictures and graphics and charts and things, and that's okay. But just put it through the filter, like, is this legitimately something that TAB should take up? Or am I just carrying a standard for something that I hope TAB will follow me on? Your responsibility is to advise staff and council on stuff that's already going on. It's not to add pieces to the smorgasbord. Doesn't mean that there's not something that's missing from the smorgasbord. That's okay, but just do a little double check, do a little gut check. Is this a legit thing that I'm asking all of these people to listen to, think about, and prioritize for, probably for the next meeting or at some point in the future? Is it a better item that's more long-term strategy and would be more suitable for discussion at a retreat or at our, when we're prioritizing things and making a statement to council, here's what TAB once in a year is gonna say, we want to elevate these issues. Is what you're bringing actually more appropriate for a fuller discussion on that? Is it a bigger policy issue? Or you're trying to heat up the ocean? Don't do that during a TAB meeting, please. Okay,
So
next.
you're saying like, if you have an idea for some project that the city should move forward with, you should start by talking with staff and develop the idea and then maybe develop it as an agenda item.
Maybe, yeah. You really think that a gondola between here and Netherland would be excellent?
My name on
Remember the trick question from earlier, because there's a fine line of directing staff's work plan. That is the role of the city manager.
Yes,
Mm.
yeah. And then we've had quite a bit of discussion about how TAB is interacting with staff outside of the meetings. I've had nothing but really lovely conversations individually with staff members, people here in the room and without. But I've learned over time that it should get funneled through the director. I would say the one, and Garrett's not here to defend himself, but often Garrett just has a depth of knowledge about where the money's going, why it got that way, why it got allocated this way, and the nitty-gritties. He's just gonna have to be the one to answer. It doesn't mean Valor doesn't scoop it, his way once you've lobbed it. But you're more likely to have really long conversations with Garrett about budget items and the capital improvement projects plan, because he's just been doing it for so long, and it's just a bear to get your head around. Danny's like, I'm glad it's not my job. Yeah. If you see something wrong with the agenda, or with the minutes from the previous meeting, that's easier cleaned up ahead of time than at the meeting. So, if you notice something there, that's definitely a great thing. But in general, you won't have a whole lot of direct interaction with Meredith, unless you're the chair or vice chair and dealing directly with the minutes. Yes, broadcast and attend community engagement meetings. So I watched the June meeting, and at the end, Darcy was giving opportunities. She's like, well, they're having a meeting here, Flatirons High School, this and that. That's a great time at the end of the meeting to highlight stuff that's in your orbit that maybe hasn't been highlighted by staff. It isn't led by staff. It's, some other thing with BBSD, say. So just as you can bring things to TAB's attention from your own individual orbit and interest areas and connections, you can bring city business and TAB business to bear with those other organizations that you work with. It goes both ways, and that is, and that is a key reason you were appointed, really, is the council loves people who have deep roots in different kinds of organizations, because it just all cross-pollinates.
So a question about that.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were in one of these other forums.
Yeah.
We're there as individuals though, right? We're not.
Well,
on behalf of TAB.
okay, you're still a TAB member, so we would have a problem, we three, at a community cycles advocacy committee meeting.
No, yeah, but I'm thinking.
Like the Golden Valley Comprehensive Plan.
Yeah, like that.
There, okay.
Public stuff.
Yes.
Are we rolling in? What I'm saying is like.
You are wearing a special hat, whether you're wearing your badge or not.
It's
Well,
true.
I'm not
You have a
talking
bit
the
of a
public
halo.
meetings thing, I'm
Okay.
just saying like, if we're providing input,
Mhm.
right? That's the community, so I'm a member of the community there to engage.
Good.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm engaging as an individual, not on behalf of the town,
Okay,
right?
great.
Yeah.
I think that's great, but don't talk tonight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, even at like one of those big events that the BDCP team is putting on,
Yeah.
we wouldn't want to stand next to each other and say, oh, they should focus on this, on the transportation aspect. You know,
Right.
we're in a different part of the room, we're doing different things, we're giving our feedback as individuals.
Yeah.
But yeah, not conferring.
So yes, you're exercising your First Amendment right.
Yeah.
You have to be aware, you look like you're gossiping. So to make sure.
Yeah, and that's totally, I was just like, what am I there for? Because if I'm being encouraged to attend one of these things, I'm still just attending as an individual. I'm not there on behalf of the board.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of getting back into that conversation around open meetings laws. I think your question is when you as a TAB member are invited to participate in, say, like another department's engagement, you are there as a member of the community, and we want you to be mindful that even if you are just there as a member of the community, you still, people know that you are a TAB member, and so you kind of have that responsibility. That goes to the code of conduct. I think maybe on this slide, Tila touched on this earlier. One of the things we want to discuss today is just, you know, I think Tila put it in a really good way. Like, council chooses people for boards and commissions that have really deep ties to the community. So they're not just looking for you to weigh in with like your personal ideas and preferences. They're looking for you to go through your networks with the community, hear what people in the community have to say, and have that be a part of the conversation that you bring back to the board or that you bring to a meeting like the one you're describing. So I think that's kind of more what Tila, I don't know if you have any good examples of that, where we do want you to broadcast to the public that meetings are happening, but we also want you to talk to people about things as well.
Yeah. And like, I mean, you're no Einstein, but if Einstein came into the room and we're talking about transportation planning for, you know, the Boulder Valley School District or ways to like get people to enroll closer to home, people would pay more attention to what Einstein thinks on that question. Just because Einstein walked in the room. So, you know,
be mindful of your.
Yes.
Yes.
Whether you are exercising it or not. When you are engaging in these public meetings.
That's right. People look to us as.
Right. Like, oh, Darcy knows her stuff. She's a PhD in this stuff. It's not irrelevant and you can't pretend that it's not. And so I stand by, like, if we, the three of us were in a community cycles advocacy committee meeting, we were all city members of TAB, that would be a no-go. Okay. Is there another, I see the question at the bottom, and I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is mainly if anyone has any questions, like, what else can I do to?
I think there was one other thing I wanted to touch on here, and that is, you know, you'll get emails from members of the community, and there's no real, there's no system, there's no protocol for how to respond to that. And frequently staff will respond and copy you on it. It's more thorough than anything I would put together. But sometimes you just want to like reach out and hold their hand and be like, that's, I'm sorry you had that experience or whatever. You are, again, gotta say, like, you know, you might hear from somebody else. I'm a member of TAB. I read it. I'm just writing because I'm interested, but TAB hasn't talked about this. Like, you have to kind of be clear. You're welcome to interact with any member of the community. They've emailed you, it's not inappropriate to email them back. Just make sure you're not like over promising. Don't throw anybody under the bus. Be mindful it's a public record. And try not to like step on any toes, but if there's some insight you have or some empathy you have or some shared connection, that's a great thing to do. It really makes people feel heard. Makes them feel more connected to their local government.
And I'll just talk a little bit about a practice that I started to do pretty consistently over the last 11 months is to make it more predictable for you all as TAB members is sometimes I will respond to an email where I know that I, as a member of staff, have pertinent information to share that would help that person have a new understanding or a bigger picture. And so I will say something like, all TAB members who you just emailed have received your message. I'm responding on behalf of staff with this little bit of information, but you may hear from TAB members individually. And I think that practice has been working really well because typically, I think what we've done in the past, especially when Tila was chair, is that Tila would use her discretion to then maybe respond to certain emails that come in from members of the public. Sometimes members of the public think that they're emailing a decision-making body.
Totally.
And it's not really for staff to kind of get into that and explain all of that. It's really TAB's role to explain, we are an advisory board. We will take your thoughts into consideration. And so I think a good practice moving forward is if you are curious, should someone respond to this email? Then the chair or the vice chair should contact me and we should talk about it. And feel free to call me anytime or, let me know if you have a question about something like that, because then I can say, you know what, we don't really have much to offer from the staff side, or, oh, we are working on a little bit we're gonna send out, but it would also be helpful if you respond as well. So I think it just needs conversation. What would you say, Tila?
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. Sometimes people don't know who they're, talking to. They think we're working on state laws, or they think, they have a great idea for how to run the Boulder banner next year. And you're like, that's not what we do.
Well, an example of that actually, so like we get an email from the public, it's sent to TAB, and that gets forwarded to all of us, right?
That's right.
Okay. My response from a personal email, is that part of the public record?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Whether it's your personal Hotmail or Yahoo, whatever, or your specific Gmail you set up with the tab and the thing, your tab email, any response you send as a tab member is public record. Yes.
Well, like one example is somebody in my neighborhood wrote about a specific problem with which I am familiar, and I responded to her and empathized that was a problem that I recognized.
Sure.
And thanked her for for consideration of that, and I think I brought it up with Valerie, it was about school chart, like the traffic on Knox, and so, and this is maybe something that we could eventually address, but it's not, because it would have to be sort of a staff item, and it's complicated, right, because there's so much work already going on, but this person had a legitimate concern, and I wanted to assure her that the concern was heard. Without overpromising what could be done.
Yeah. And sometimes with those people, especially if you know them in the neighborhood, I'm very happy to go out in the neighborhood and meet with them. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm free at 1:00 tomorrow. Let's go at that intersection. You can vetch directly at me. Like, that's awful. Wow, yeah, that's good to think about. Okay, have a good day. And they feel better, and they don't email staff anymore. Nothing happens. Or I explain why it's a good idea to have them, this tall or this far away from the curb or whatever.
But you answer that email, for example.
I answered that email.
Do you CC Valerie or BCC her, like, logistically, how does anybody know that conversation happened?
Well,
Maybe not.
It's not necessarily, I mean, I think
It's up
if
to
you're
your
just,
discretion.
if you're just empathizing, it's okay to respond to them one-on-one, but if it's a matter for staff. And they're asking for, I mean, Valerie's gonna answer anything, but then maybe if I have personal experience with that or something, or, something relevant to share, and I can copy Valerie, and so that person sees that there's sort of a chain of responsibility.
No, but I mean, if that's a public record, how someone requested, because there will be no record. That happens except for your email that is personal.
Yeah.
So the decision when have, like, somebody requests access, how will anybody know to search your email?
If there's a public records request, then all tab members need to be forthcoming with any communication relating to city business, no matter what device it's on or what personal.
So if it's a
whatever.
controversial matter, don't answer it.
I would say one practice tab members can use their discretion, any of you, is you can BCC your other fellow tab members when you respond to somebody. If you think that that would be helpful for your fellow tab members to see that you sent that note, but don't put it in the CC, because then you are allowing someone the opportunity to make the mistake of replying all. And then you're getting it. So always BCC, or just forward the email later.
Yeah, I
and
forward it
BCC
later
people
usually.
in the forward. So always BCC your fellow tab members.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about so, we got this email where Dad did a whole bunch of, iris modeling, it was homebrew iris modeling. And like, I looked at that, and go, I don't have the expertise to evaluate this, but I don't know if anybody's going to, I don't know if there's gonna be a response to this guy. He certainly seems like he put a lot of time and energy into his analysis. So it feels like he somebody should respond to it. Maybe he's not gonna like what we say, but I don't, but I'm also feeling like, well, but.
So
Should
specific
I-
examples today in this training, this session here, I think we should avoid talking about. But what I would recommend in a situation where someone writes in and you're curious, is someone gonna respond to this person? That's a cue for you to reach out to the tab chair and vice chair,
Okay.
and say, hey, I kind of have a feeling that maybe someone should respond. Are you thinking about responding, right? And that way you get some clarity on what the intent is. And I do think that formal responses, the responsibility kind of falls to the chair and the vice chair together to discuss. And so you can make a suggestion to the chair. This is an email that we should maybe take a look at and issue a response. And then if it's a matter you want to agendize and issue a formal response from TAB through an action, voting to issue a letter, then that's also like a more formal mechanism that you can do. And I think Tila, you may, I think we probably need to move on to other topics today, but I don't know if you have any other just final thoughts on like the workings of email, because it is unclear.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would think it's a best practice to set up your separate email account. For a tab, like mine's still open. I'm monitoring it basically for anything that I think I need to flag for YouTube, but I'm not answering anything. And most of it's just notifications about like statewide stuff and planning and things. But it helps keep it cleaner. So, when there is a records request, you have one place to search, right? Not 7 email accounts and 4 different computers. Yeah, so we're on the last slide here, preparing for meetings. We've talked about it. The one thing I didn't really reach out or highlight is not only to read your packet, you should be very familiar with what's in the current transportation master plan. You should have a physical copy of that one. I love virtual meetings. I love that all this stuff is available. I still think the city archives are impossible to navigate to find something in particular. But some things you really need a hard physical copy for, and that's one of them. You should be at least modestly familiar with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan as it relates to transportation and land use planning. That should be, because it's sort of the overarching architecture for what city staff is doing. And has some longer term stuff. You might have really strong ideas about mixed use zoning. And that might be on the work plan or on the horizon because of something in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. And that can help you avoid looking dumb when you're trying to propose it in a tab meeting. So yeah, read your packets, know what the process getting that agenda item was before. Sometimes it will refer to a regional or a subdivisional plan. You'll need to know what's in that too. You don't need to memorize it, but you need to have looked at it and be like sort of familiar with how long a particular plan has been in place. Because, in some places we can be really nimble, but at other times trying to change directions is just like trying to change a battleship and you've just got a rowboat. So kind of understand the limitations, practical and legal, about your role here, and just do your best to be useful. You're here to serve.
So before we take a break, I think a last discussion question might be, you've seen some material in the agenda packet that has been given to you a couple weeks in advance. And you're thinking, I'd like to make some modifications that I might like to propose and have my fellow TAB members consider and vote on. Tila, do you have any guidance for TAB members today on what's a best way to approach that? I think you mentioned earlier that the best thing to do is do that not 2 p.m. the day of the meeting, but maybe, earlier better. Any other guidance you have?
I in looking at a particular, let's say a modification of the speed management program or something. I'll probably have 20 different ideas and nitpicks. I don't think that they're all necessarily meriting time at the TAB meeting. So prioritize, and odds are, one of your other members is going to raise something similar. Be prepared to talk about that succinctly. But for other little like nitpicks and questions and things, that can be reserved for an email before or after the meeting. asked through Valerie, but like, I was wondering if Danny could really, I was confused about this bit, or this, this page doesn't look like it matches with the graphic 6 pages later. What's going on? But that kind of like proofreading, that doesn't need to happen at the meeting. Proposing real modifications to how something works, like, wow, I don't think we are prioritizing, the effect of a crash history, not at this particular location, but within a quarter mile, or it's been on this Vision Zero action plan because we have a, demonstrated problem along this corridor, and it's just like that corridor. I think we should be thinking broader about being proactive on those things. That kind of bigger directional guidance, I think, could be really helpful.
Yeah. So, any questions before we move on? We have one more section to get through in 30 minutes, less than 30 minutes. Yeah, please.
So the example I was thinking of when I asked my previous question is the core arterial network. I wasn't involved when that happened. My understanding of the history is it came from a couple of city council members and a couple of TAB members. Just wondering, how that sort of thing is introduced as a new concept for a project.
So, yeah, I think that's an excellent example, Mike. It kind of happened at the end of a presentation on, and Devin gave it on the Safe Streets report, on the draft. And I was like, look, on page 46, you make the observation that 67% of your serious crashes are happening on 7% of the network. I'm like, you are burying the lead. And they were like, oh, that is kind of an important thing, isn't it? And it was worth changing, the emphasis in the final report, but also really activated 2 TAB members to talk about it. I actually told Alex, like, don't do a map, like, don't do staff's work. They know how to do their work. So I didn't like him writing his own map, but a couple of city council members did. They kind of took it upon themselves to present it to a couple city council members. And I think the city council members also were appropriately alarmed, by this small fact of information and the idea that if things like the neighborhood speed management program were popular because it was right on your neighborhood street, or the NPP, which I can nitpick to death. People love it because for only $17 or $30 a year, they get big perks. It's not actually helping us achieve our larger goals, transportation wise. And so just having that conversation with the TAB members and a couple city council members to then come to, I think it was Natalie at the time, to be like, I think this actually has merit. What do you think about doing this? It was not happening at TAB. It did affect the staff work plan. It did affect a whole lot of things. And it was, I think, an important lesson in building political cover for doing harder things that we're asking staff to do. I think we tried to talk about Iris Avenue and changing Iris Avenue as part of the Living Labs project when Folsom happened. Folsom was going to be one of 5 and Iris was going to be one of those. I think the difference in the outcome between that attempt to talk about changing Iris and the most recent attempt to change Iris was all about building political capital. And making sure that the decision makers owned their decision and weren't like shoving staff under the bus. So I think that's why CAN happened the way it did. And that's, I think, why we're continuing to be able to make progress on it.
So I think bottom line of this is an example of where that idea wasn't just sprung on staff at random in a TAB meeting,
right?
Without any prior coordination or discussion. So, yeah, I think if there are big ideas out there, that's something you want to kind of workshop before you might raise it under matters from.
Yeah, absolutely. That thinking about, can I bring it forth as a matter from TAB? Do I have a solution to propose? Am I just here complaining? Or do I have something proactive to do and to give? Those can give you a yes or no answer on those. Okay, I've talked too much, sorry.
No, so say, when I was a member of VAB, the environmental board, before I joined, so like a year or 2 before I joined in 2019, during the time where they were discussing the memo to council, a board member introduced the concept of urban heat islands, and they put it in the memo. And initially it didn't gain any traction, like it didn't, nobody paid much attention. But I think like it captured the attention of one staff member. Cool, I started looking more into it, so like it started getting mentioned more and more. And it just kind of slowly snowballed, and now it's the whole boulder project. So it took a little bit of time and, energy and, yeah, somebody to get attention from that. And I don't think it ever got much love from council, but I think it got attention from staff. And I think it did align with the climate action plan, so, now it's a reality-ish.
Yeah.
So there's another way.
That's really helpful, Arnon. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just in the interest of time, for those of you online, I'm about to make everyone stand up from their chair and have a little movement break. It's optional if you choose. And we may just mute the Zoom for a second and we will resume shortly. So everyone, stand up, maybe roll your shoulders back 5 times. Roll your shoulders forward 5 times. Step outside if you need to grab some water. And then we're gonna get into the next part of the presentation in about 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Oh.
Because we are only here until 3 o'clock and we are short on time.
Oh, it's downstairs, that's right.
Oh, really?
Once I get 3 10 members back, I'm going. We're a little behind schedule.
Questions and.
Yeah. No.
And it's over.
I've been missing these.
Oh, isn't it great when you find?
I didn't bring any today.
They weren't on top of your head. That's good.
Right.
Hey, Glenn. Thanks, Glenn.
Bye, Sheila. Bye, thank you.
Okay, watch for our 10 members to come back in.
It's been 2 minutes. You said 30 seconds.
All right. Yeah, thanks for being like. Yeah. I already know. It's like,
Sydney, did you hear from Melanie? Was the sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I didn't see.
There's a video, but it's not really quite so.
Okay. Yeah, it might just be like multiple laptop situation. Yeah. Well, for the limitations of the room, I think we've making it work.
That's right.
Are they on their way now?
I didn't see them.
Okay, it's all right.
I was like, I need to go.
Oh.
Did you see my closet?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry, here for a snack. Trees.
Oh,
Where? You told me this fall.
They're 1921. So my oldest is has no career in South.
It's still just 3.
No, no, I just have.
Okay, I'm gonna get started again, everyone. So we're gonna unmute the Zoom in just a second.
Okay. There are 3 members here.
There are 3 members here.
You're okay.
All right, Sydney.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, we're back on. Hi, everyone online. We're back. We're gonna get started in the next section, which is an overview of the Transportation and Mobility Department. So we want to just give you some quick information about our leadership and organizational chart, the functional areas of the department, which is something that sometimes TAB members don't really know about when they join the board. Talk a little bit about our funding sources and the uses of those funds, and some signature initiatives and work programs that we're working on as a department. So these are, when we talk about the department's leadership, these are the folks we're talking about. But really, the philosophy of our organization is that everyone is leading on our, core principles, our department's strategic work, no matter where you are in an org chart. But these are the folks you might interact with most frequently at TAB meetings. So essentially our director, deputy director, our managers of our different divisions and functional areas. Some facts about our department are that we have about 98 full-time employees, full-time equivalents right now, staff people, but we have about 30 vacant positions. So not all of those 98 positions are filled, and most of those vacancies are in our maintenance and our operations divisions. We're currently under a hiring freeze as a city, and we talked about that at our last TAB meeting, so won't go into that too much today. But also wanted to note that we are really unique in the city structure because we share a business services division with the utilities department. And that's not just a reflection of the fact that we used to be unified with utilities under public works, but are now separate departments. But we do very similar work. We do a lot of capital projects. So we share a bunch of staff. That's about 29 full-time staff under the business services division, and about 13 are supporting our transportation department directly. We also have communications and engagement department staff that provide dedicated support to our department. So here's more of an organizational chart. So if you kind of want a different way to look at our team here, these are the different functional areas of our department. So we have a municipal airport. We're in the process of hiring a new airport manager. We've had an interim airport manager for the last few months while we did a national search to hire the new airport manager. So you'll hear more about that soon. Right now, we in our transportation maintenance division, so that's our street maintenance, our greenways, multi-use path maintenance, medians, snow, all of that, street sweeping. We have a vacancy in the manager position. And so J.R. Combs, one of our street maintenance supervisors, is doing a fabulous job in an acting role, taking on some of those duties while we conduct a hiring process to fill that vacancy. Garrett oversees our capital projects division. You've heard about him today because he's managing a big capital improvement program, among other things, major projects, things like that. Devin, our principal traffic engineer, oversees our transportation operations division. So that's like our signage, our striping, our signals, our streetlights, all sorts of things like that. The kind of core functions of our street network and our roadway network. Stephen oversees our transportation planning division, and those are the folks that are, looking at things like our programs, transportation demand management. There's, all the planners that you probably interact with at our community engagement events are on Stephen's team. Danny oversees our transit program and transit operations. So like and works with Sydney, who's here too, on the operation of our local HOP service, coordination with RTD and other partners regionally on transit operations. And then Jean, our policy advisor, is working on more long range and regional transit planning and policy. And that's all those regional partnerships. Tila mentioned she always appreciates the updates that Jean gives. So I'm flying through this because we're short on time, but want to also just mention Aisha supports us in communications and engagement. And then here are the folks that are in our business services division that are supporting our teams. Corey Forrester is over our GIS and asset management staff. Dwayne Sullivan is over our business operations and support services, which has a cool acronym, the BOSS team. Our financial services staff are headed up by Mary Courtwright, and she is fantastic at keeping us organized. And then Mary is also keeping us organized every day as the executive assistant to both the transportation director and the utilities director. So what guides our work at the city is really encapsulated in this pyramid. So you're always going to see departments and city council talking about this pyramid. So at the top of our, One Boulder, our unified approach citywide across all departments to the work we do is our Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience, or SARE framework. Then under that comes the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. That's the overarching planning document for the city and how it interacts with the region. Citywide strategic plan flows from that. That's where it's a recent addition to the city to have a citywide strategic plan. So those are specific actions across all the functional areas of the city structure that the city is focused on for the next several years. And then under that will come department strategic plans. Those are going to replace the master plans of old. And so the city manager's office right now is working on, after the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan is updated and refreshed next year, is working on crafting an approach for all departments to take to formulate new department strategic plans that will look a little different than the master plans of old. Vision and goals will really start to live up at that Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan level, and departmental strategic plans will be more tactical, more action oriented.
Is that gonna replace the team?
It will. And so there's no plans to create a new department strategic plan at this time. We are waiting for direction from the city manager's office. All departments are. And then under that, you have annual department work planning. That continues. That is really the bread and butter of what we as staff do every day. Those departmental work plans are created by our management team, all the people you saw on this slide here, right? And then flowing down to the different divisions of the city, or of the department.
So I was asking that question simply because, Tila was saying, we should have a printed copy of the TMP. And I'm wondering, well, it's 2019, it's kind of old. It looks like there's a strategic plan in the offing that might be, something that's actually going to be guiding the work.
Right. So
like,
yeah.
How wedded should we get to a document that was last updated in 2019?
I would say my guidance is that the 2019 TMP is still a fabulous document. It is still very relevant to the work we do every day. We reference it as staff every day. And so Tila's suggestion, I think, is spot on. And think about it like the vision that is in that document is really not going to change substantially into the future. It really has been kind of at the core of the practice of the city for so long. So think of the department strategic plan will kind of be a new tactical layer in this structure of how to actually achieve those goals and objectives that are so well defined in the TMP. So some of those TMP goals and objectives may kind of find a home in these other higher level documents that you see in this pyramid in the future.
Well, like there's a transportation aspect of the BVCP.
Exactly.
And so that's, everything's coming together.
And that brings me to this slide, which is I encourage all of you to please, as staff members, participate in these two huge efforts that the city is undertaking right now. One is the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan update, and then Fund Our Future, which is the community engagement arm of the long-term financial strategy effort that is happening and has been underway. And previously, I think on one of the slides we mentioned, watch council meetings, because you will learn a lot about the citywide long-term financial strategy and how it affects transportation by watching council meetings. We might bring you little bits of information to tab, but that's where you can really do a deep dive, is learning through the conversation that is happening at the council level. So here are the TMP and climate goals that we follow as staff. In our transportation master plan, our core objectives are to be safe, equitable, reliable, provide travel choices, and support our clean air and climate commitment. And over on the right side, you'll see at the top in green, those come from the city's climate commitment document. Ernan, you might be very familiar with this from your time on EAB, but these are our goals by 2030 to reduce emissions by 70%, net zero in 2035, carbon positive in 2040. And then how do we get there? That's in our TMP. These stats on the bottom in blue. So try to reduce resident trips to 20% that are single occupancy in vehicles. Reduce non-resident trips to 60%. So these are the targets we're trying to hit by 2030. We want 80% of people walking, biking, transiting, and carpooling. we want 40% of non-resident trips doing that as well. All right, now budget principles. I'm flying through this too, so we can always follow up later with more information, but what kind of principles guide our work? So we have our sustainability, equity and resilience framework, the citywide strategic plan. There's also outcomes and measures now associated with a lot of our budget strategies. I believe that Karen Steiner might be joining us today to talk a little bit about the long-term financial strategy. Do you see her online, Sydney? Okay, and I'll just set this up for Karen so she can prepare to speak in just a second. We'll try and get the speakers on the TV working for that. If not, then I can cover that topic. But for our department, we aren't just mindful of those citywide principles. We're also mindful of what's in our transportation master plan. So if you read that document, there are really lovely spreads in there that talk about not just our mission and vision and the work that we do, our policies and goals, all of that, but also what is the guidance in that plan for the investment and prioritization of our funding. And so you've heard Garrett speak to this in his recent CIP presentations. What's high priority? It's, travel safety, Vision Zero, maintenance of our system, taking care of what we have, bridge repair, our operations of our system every day, like signal enhancements, upgrading our cabinets or something like that, right? Those are the kind of things that are high priority for our funding. And then, kind of deprioritized are things like quality of life improvements. So that is all coming from our transportation master plan, not just from like staff like saying what we think or something. All right. And then transportation funding. We enjoy a dedicated sales tax. That's a 6% sales tax or 0.6% sales tax that was approved in 67. That does not expire. A 0.15% sales tax approved in 2013 and has expired already in 2019. That was part of the picture, is no longer part of the picture. And so then in 2020, they redirected a 0.15% sales tax from OSMP that will remain until the end of 2029, when that shifted back to the general fund. So that tax will still be collected, just not devoted or dedicated to transportation. For every $10 that are spent in Boulder, 7.5 cents is going towards transportation, just to give you like a frame of reference for what all this means. These percentages can be kind of hard to conceptualize. So the city also receives funding through federal, state, and other local sources. So that's really important. To do all the work that we do, we have to leverage our local dollars to get external grant funds, whether it's from the state, federal government, et cetera. And I think one thing that's really cool on this graphic is to just see, the breakdown. That 7.5 cents for transportation is just a piece of the pie for every retail sales tax dollar that's collected in Boulder. And then let's see. On this kind of shows our operating budget for 2025, just to give you a snapshot of what an average year looks like for us. 53% of our operating budget for our department is going to capital. 18% is going to operating. And then you can see what piece of it is just personnel, staff. And then there's a dedicated allocation to internal services. And this is another breakdown kind of by the program area that's a little bit more descriptive of like the work we do. So 55% going to our capital improvement plan, some going to our planning division, at 12%, 9% going to our operations division, 11% going to our maintenance division. I'd like to invite Karen, if she is here, to talk a little bit the long-term financial strategy. We are at time, basically. So I'm going to let Karen talk for a couple minutes, and then we are going to end this Zoom session. And then if you all have follow-up questions about how our department is structured, our funding, how that is, allocated, how that works, you are welcome to follow up with me individually.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Steiner. Can you hear me okay? Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me now?
Something I'd really like for you all to have on your radar. It's really rooted in the sustainability of the city, the equity of how we deploy our resources, our resilience as a city. And I am going to need to figure out how to advance my screen because let's see. I lost it. 1 second. Here we go. We are going to be talking with council and Chris Haglund has already given you all on tab this presentation about a transportation maintenance fee that might start to help us chip away at some of those sales tax dollars that are not going to be dedicated to the department any longer in the next few years. And just as we, weather some of the financial uncertainty over the next few years. I won't cover that since you've already had a briefing on that from staff, but just wanted to make sure that this has been a long and winding road. For your awareness, a lot of work has gone into this over the last decade, involvement from previous TAB members and a number of community members. So this is something we'll be talking about later this year with council. And here's some of our priority work plan projects. So these are projects with a capital P. They are an effort that has a discrete end date or beginning date. Like think of it as like a project you could put on a Gantt chart. So obviously the CAN projects are top of list, implementing our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant money that we were awarded. Really looking at the safety and maintenance of our airport, doing some key actions there. Unleaded aviation fuel, exploring how we might start to partner with the state to maybe bring unleaded aviation fuel to the airport. Media improvements along Broadway, implementing our Vision Zero action plan, and streetlight separation and conversion, something that's been a big focus for us this year, converting all of the streetlights that were recently acquired by the city to LED. Also that transportation funding that I just mentioned, and the AMPS study and implementation, which you've already heard the on-street and off-street parking, and soon you will hear more on the TDM ordinance that's part of that three-legged stool. We also have core focus areas, even though they don't sound like projects or have discrete end dates and start dates. We are always focused on these things. And this is a huge bulk of the department staff's time is pavement management, the mobility enhancements that we couple with those core maintenance and operations. Our Vision Zero commitment every day in the work that we do. Our employee satisfaction, retention, and recruitment is something we actively work on inside the department. Work around equity that we are doing as a department that all city departments are doing. That's something that staff are working on behind the scenes as well. Continuing our council priority work on the CAN, our major CIP projects, implementing those. Folks are out on construction sites, overseeing contractors. That's like a lot of the work folks are doing every day that you don't see at TAP. Airport safety and operations, and asset management. Asset management is a big focus. We started to look at that this year, and you'll be hearing more about that next year. We've got a ton of major construction projects that I mentioned. We're looking at our first year of our new snow and ice response program. More information is coming on that later this summer, and our departmental equity plan. So we are at the wrap up. We're going to end the Zoom session in just a couple minutes. One thing that Tila mentioned is the TAB handbook. This is kind of like a rules of procedure document. Last TAB retreat, there was discussion that might be something TAB would like to officially adopt and sign, and the thing is written and drafted and probably doesn't need a whole lot of updating. So that's something that this board can consider working on over the next year together. You don't have to decide today. That would be kind of to have more specificity and more guidance for you as TAB members than just Robert Rules of Order.
Yeah.
And also be something really useful for new members when they come on board.
That'd be great.
So that's something that you all can take up, maybe under matters from the board to discuss together. And does anyone have any closing thoughts or remaining questions?
So to be clear, that the TAB handbook is something new.
it is something that has been long drafted, long ago. And the last TAB retreat you all had, you decided that, yeah, you'd like to explore adopting that. And then I think it just kind of fell to the wayside.
Okay, so we need to bring it up during matters.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, if we are finished, I will move, or I will
Yes.
ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Michael moves to adjourn. Is there a second? None, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, unanimous leave, 4-0. We voted to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for joining us today.